Hi, this is Dr. Elizabeth Saunders Medlock with Life by Design Coaching for your coaching tip for the week of February 11th, a very late coaching tip. Happy Valentine's Day on February 14th. This is my coaching tip on love. So today that's what I'm going to talk about. This is part of my book that I'm writing. I decided, given that it was Valentine's Day, I'd focus a little bit on relationships. And the one thing that I really wanted to talk about was something that I talk about, as I said in my book, of how to find kind of a good relationship and the questions that you really need to ask someone that is going to be your partner. What I found is, and what I've heard is that women and men, by the time that they get to their kind of early to mid-30s, have a checklist of things that they're looking for in another partner relationship. And I've heard these checklists can be pages long, many questions. And what they do is they're questions that accumulate from the baggage of your past relationships. There are things that you've been burned with in the past, or you realize you don't like about people. And as you get older, you get pickier, and you kind of know what you want and you don't want. And the list of questions become about that. And I think what happens is when we focus on all those, yes, I like this, I don't like this happened to me in the past, I don't want it to happen again, and we base our questions on the baggage we had in the past and the experiences we had in the past, we miss the key elements of what really is important in forming a long-term stable relationship. The book Committed by Elizabeth Gilbert, which was her follow-up to Eat, Pray, Love, is really good because she talks about her partner that she eventually marries. And one of the best things I liked about that book, she talked in general about the idea of the reason that we have life partners is that we need someone to share our story. So that our story, when it's shared, becomes real and it becomes a shared memory. It's kind of like if a tree falls in the woods, and no one's around, does anyone hear it? So it's kind of like your tree falling in the woods and there's someone to hear your story, to share your story. So you really need someone that's going to commit to sharing life with you in the kind of interwoven space that it takes to really share in a life, in a partnership, which I think the checklist of questions that we end up having doesn't really necessarily address that. So I came up with 4 questions that this is all I really need to know. I threw away my list of questions. Really, it was a long list, you do not believe. I think I put it in one of my blogs. It was like 30 questions. And decided that all I really needed to know was 4 questions. One was, do you love yourself and do you have the capacity to give and receive love? And that's a question we need to ask ourselves too. Do we love ourselves and do we have the capacity to give and receive love? Number 1. If the person you're with doesn't love themselves or have that capacity, and I've been with those people, and so have you, the relationship isn't going to be a rich, full, long-lasting life partnership. Secondly is, can you communicate your wants, your needs, and your hopes, desires, and dreams? All of those. As you know, there's a lot of people that are great at communicating their needs. They're great at communicating their wants, but they're not so great at communicating the other stuff. Or maybe they're not so great at communicating your needs, and you're supposed to be a mind reader. And that creates problems. We've all been in that situation. So can they clearly communicate needs, wants, hope, dreams, and fears also? That's the second big question. They can do that. If you can do that, then you're right for a relationship. The third question is, can you commit to something for the long term through the good times and the bad times? So I think that's very important is, can a person make a commitment? And a commitment in not just when everything's rosy, but the commitment that can weather through rough times. And again, I think that's another thing that really stalls relationships is we find people that say they're committed, but when things get rough, they bail. So the commitment through the rough times, I think is important. And then the last thing is, can you communicate about yourself? Do you know yourself well enough to communicate with the other person authentically and wholly? So that's another thing I really look for in a person that knows themselves well and can communicate about themselves. Because if they don't know themselves, how the heck are you going to get to know them? They don't even know who they are. You're not going to find out who they are, and that's their responsibility. So you're looking for a person, and that's important to examine in yourself too. Do I know myself well, and can I communicate about myself authentically and openly? That's it. 4 questions. I know from my experience now, when I ask these questions, I toss a lot of people out. And I find when I don't ask these questions and a relationship unravels, if I would have asked them, they wouldn't have passed the 4 questions. So use them. Do you love yourself and can give and capable of giving and receiving love? Communicate your needs, wants, hopes, fears, desires, and dreams. Can you communicate about yourself? Know yourself well enough to communicate yourself about authentically and openly? And can you commit to something for the long term in both the good times and the not so good times? That's it. If you use these 4 questions and you really look at people and you really examine yourself using those 4 questions, then you'll find that you're going to really look for people and stay with people and build relationships with people that are authentic, whole, and have the ability to be a long-term partnership. This is your life coaching tip of the week. I'll see you next week for another tip. Have a great week.